Okay,
So-
we're recording.
Thank you. We will call the Economic Development meeting to order. And we will start with ferry ridership and Brandy.
So I just wanted to give the committee an update on the ridership count. So the legal size, this one right here, we separated it into two separate forms. I think it'd be a little bit easier instead of this big, huge, cumbersome page. But this is just a synopsis of the date of service, the amount of dollars that we collected for the ride, or Kitsap Harbor Tours collected, the hourly rate for that service, and then what we actually ended up paying out, because what they did is they charged us $152.85 per hour, and then they deducted the cash that we actually received, and so that's what we had to pay. And then we just kind of did an average cost per entity. And then we just broke it down a little bit further into average cost per rider. But all in all, the city of Port Orchard paid out $5,221. Total service was a little under $20,000. And then we just broke it down. We just had it historically. So total event holiday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sunday services. Down at the bottom, it just kind of tells you what each entity paid. So the city of Port Orchard, city of Bremerton, and Port of Bremerton all paid the $5,221.65. The three of us did not meet our max. However, Kitsap County contributed $4,000. They did hit their max, so we ended up splitting the difference.
The 304.
Yeah. So, and then the bigger sheet, this big legal one, or not legal, ledger size.
Go on. What's the difference between cost per entity and average cost per rider?
So the cost, let's see. So what we basically did is we took the total cost of service, which was $5,200, and then divided it by the total ridership to give us 80 cents overall, you know, and so like if you look, so the last two dates, August 31st and September 1st, you can see we made 16 cents for every rider. And then as you get to some of these riderships where, we only collected $4, probably because it was a low fare. Friday was historically low.
Because I know some council members are going to say like the
right,
first Friday we paid $50 for those four, whatever.
But overall, I mean, if you take the 20,000, or actually, excuse me, the 5,000 we pay, it's overall 6,500 people rode the ferry over I think it was a 6.5 week time frame, 13.5 weeks time frame. We paid 80 cents per rider. I mean, that's
what was the total? What was the total for the 20 grand? Did you do that math?
20 divided by 13.5 weeks, or what was
the 20? That's 19,665 for the 6,500 total passengers.
Oh, take that and divide it.
I got it here now.
Yeah, that one I don't think we did.
So that divided by 6,517.
Oh yeah, the city paid 80 cents, yeah. And that's at that the first line.
I like that figure better than the 55 per person.
And that's average, because, and the reason why we threw that number in there, I think it's important, 80 cents per rider, because the last 2 days, we make up money. If it wasn't for those two, we would be paying quite a bit. As you can see, we collected $2,500 in cash just for those 2 days, and that helps a lot with our.
5,000, right?
I'm sorry. Oh, jeez. Yeah, 3, 4, 5, a little over 5,000 we collected, and so we actually made $2,500.
We should go longer on those days, huh?
Well, we actually didn't make anything, we just didn't pay it, right?
Well, correct.
We
Yes,
did less.
we made it and applied it to.
We budgeted more,
Yes.
$2,500 more than we ended up spending.
But I think when we look at this and study it, I think we really want to give thought to the value of Friday and Saturday nights.
And if you look on the big sheet here, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, you can, down at the bottom, so overall, 6,500 riders. And we broke it down, so total Friday ridership, this is over 13 and a half weeks, we had 122 riders. And then for Saturday services, we had 276 riders over the last, over 13 weeks. And mind you, it's only, I think we only paid an hour and a half extra, and then 2.5 on Sunday. So, I mean, you know, it is what it is, but you know, we had 4 or 5. There was one run that we didn't have any riders that we paid for them to go over, so.
I know one thing that I keep hearing from some merchants like Bobby Event at Keith Mall, she feels that we need to have some sort of standardized hours so people know what to expect each season.
Right.
I know we've seesawed between having Sunday and not having Sunday. It looks like it was a good idea to have Sunday back again. The prior year, they felt that Sunday was not a good thing, so I think the merchants do like Sundays. I heard from one that wish Sunday were later, but.
So you separated out where, like, Harbor Festival was on a Sunday, the
But
parade was
no,
on a
but,
Sunday,
but
those all
Har-
were put into the event
events,
holiday
yeah,
totals.
Yeah, if it fell on a
Okay.
holiday, yeah.
So there's no way
Like
to
cruise.
differentiate the 1282 from the total event. So the event could have, all things being equal, been 3,600 less, because there's 1,200 or so on the regular Sunday and 48 for the holidays and Sundays, or events and holidays, on the Blackberries and days.
Well, we can kind of figure it out on this one, yeah.
We just need to add 10,000 rides.
What's the funding source for this again?
Elton,
Doing really good.
Lodging.
Okay, and so that's coming forward again. May get funded at the same level next year?
We've asked the same, yeah. Do you remember the number of writers from the prior year?
Oh, I have a
Okay.
spreadsheet, but I don't.
This whole, it would be interesting if, you know, is that 6,500 line with the prior year or is it more? And maybe the year before that, but that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, I have the ridership count. I don't think they kept track of it in 2009 and 2010, but I think I have 2011 current, of the actual rider.
Yeah,
the same.
2011, 2012,
Yeah, I think we.
2013. That would
Again,
be-
I think that,
Just to compare. This is
moving forward, we're really gonna wanna look at what we do on Friday and Saturdays.
And that's what I was gonna ask in the committee as well, is here's the ridership numbers, the counts, the dollars. So looking into 2015, what is the direction of the committee? I'm assuming you're still gonna want all the partners. It takes time to get the partners to engage. Typically, I don't start the engagement until January, February. I don't know if it's important for the committee for me to start engaging them now to see if they can put it as part of their budget. Some of them automatically do. The county, actually, we were pretty fortunate to even get the $4,000 from the county.
That was a new thing.
I was
This
gonna
year-
ask you, did you talk to them?
Not for 2015,
No,
not
but
yet.
I mean, did you talk to them about this? Because
Not yet.
there was some question as to whether
I was just getting
she
ready.
would even want to pay it if we didn't go over it. I mean, there was
That's what I was just getting ready to explain to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so what happened is during the conversations that took place with Commissioner Garrido to donate, or to contribute, it was $4,000. So when we got all the negotiations, the contract was up and it was ready for her to sign, she came back and said there's a misunderstanding. Actually, we wanted to be last out. Last in, last out, I think is how she termed it. So basically, she wanted us, each entity, to max out first, and then she would dip into her 4,000. So, and, you know, I apologize for the misunderstanding, however, you know.
Is that in their contract?
I put it in the contract that it would be split equally until each person hit their max and then would drop off, because that's how I understood it. But because they literally signed the contract the day before the service was supposed to start, she went ahead and signed it. But she said next year, she's going to make sure that she's last out. So keeping that in mind, if we keep all the numbers the same, everybody
They'd be
will
higher.
hit their max, and the county would only end up paying $1,000. So this year we did get the full 4,000 out of them, but next year I wouldn't expect that we're gonna get that much out of them next
So
year.
they're the cushion.
Yeah, so, yeah, so they, if we were short between the 3 entities, they pick up the short, but,
Yeah, it's the first year that they contributed. That was nice of them.
so I just don't know if the
I've
committee
got a
wants to.
gut feeling this is the last year they'll donate it because she's gonna be mad about this, that she wasn't the last out. she'll say, well, you know, you guys budgeted 600 or 6,500, you only used 5,000, you pay it. Same thing for Bremerton. That's what she may do, I'm just, you know.
Well, no,
trying to
she
see.
insists that the other three pay first, and then they'll pay last.
I know what you're saying too, I agree, but
I
I
can see
don't
your
know
point
if
of
she's
view.
gonna agree with it.
Because they've
If I was
never
the
done it
first
before.
time,
Yeah.
you know, sign up for this and I'm paying the full 4,000 of my budget and you're not getting your max, I get it. I see your point.
Yeah, it actually looks, it does look wrong.
Well, I have a different perspective, but doesn't really matter to me, but, yeah, so.
I personally think the food fair is important. I agree with the comment you said Bobby Stewart made, is I think it needs to be consistent. And I think the Sunday service is more important than the Friday and Saturday late nights. We see that there's not a lot of usage there. And we saw last year extending it to midnight did not make it any more viable. So so your question to us is, what do we want it to look like next year? And what do you want to take forward to our partners?
Because now they're working on their budget, like I said, I don't know if, you know, would the commissioners be a little bit happier if we knew now so they can put it in the budget? You know, I haven't had conversations with the port or the city of Bremerton, so, historically they have put it in their budget. No, and they have received, I take that back, I think they received the same spreadsheets that we do in the ridership count, so, you know, all the other entities see what we see. Now, whether they put it into a spreadsheet, I don't know, but, so they're aware of the ridership count.
I would approach them to see, after they've reviewed the numbers, if they agree that we need to continue the same level of service, or whether we should drop Fridays or drop Saturdays. See what they feel their level of service, what level of service they believe we should have. I personally would be open to dropping Fridays and Saturdays.
I would not, because that's just 4 hours of service we're talking about, Friday and Saturday, and Sunday we're talking about 8 hours. So you're spending twice as much on Sunday. You are getting 3 times as many riders as Friday, Saturday, but I think it is important to just have that break and let people know that they can go later on Friday, Saturday.
That would be fine if people were using it.
Yeah.
Well, I think they will be, we're gonna, you know, all the different groups are assembling and working together to get more people over here from Seattle. We have to give it time, you know, they're gonna be using it more.
We didn't have a lot of good promotion on this, at least not at the beginning. I'm not surprised the first Friday was pretty disastrous, because we barely approved this before that Friday when it started. People didn't know. I think with you not being on POBSA, they did not do a good job promoting it.
Well, the other thing that we want to keep in all of our minds is, historically, the financial success of this has been made on Labor Day weekend. And the last 3 or 4 Labor Days, we've had good weather. And I know this Labor Day, Saturday was not good, but Sunday for the Taste of Port Orchard was good, and so was Monday was good weather. And we had a lot of ridership on those days. You can see that Saturday was not as strong, but then that was just the 2 hours. But if those were rainy days, I can guarantee you those numbers would not be that high.
What do you think if we also asked other people for contributing? Like if, let's say, one of the bars wanted to go to midnight, if we say, fine, but you pay the fees.
Well, I think we should ask Port Orchard Bay Street Association, because, you know, they're in this with us, you know.
Maybe ask them for a contribution of some amount, like,
Well, and not just them, I agree with you. I think the county should, because the county gets a lot of sales tax generated from both sides of the water.
look at the bulk of the sales tax, yeah.
Right, and they act like it's something for Port Orchard, and it's not, it's for them. They're benefiting more than they know, or more than they admit.
What we as a committee need to remember if you ride these ferries on those hours, these are not necessarily people, except for the holidays and the events. These are not people that are riding the ferry to come to Port Orchard or go to Bremerton to shop. These are people that use the ferries for transportation, to get to work, to, you know, make what other connections they make. That's what we have to keep in mind, is that we're providing transportation to citizens, and that's why I believe the county should be involved also, is because we're transporting their people back and forth.
I was hoping we would make enough on the fare box to keep our membership, or to keep our donation to it, or whatever we want to call it, our contribution to it, the same, and increase the hours. You know, because if we don't get, I think if we don't get tourists from Seattle over here, we're going to consistently be out of money before we're out of projects. I think sales tax is what's going to help our city. And to do that, the most economical way is to get tourism over here from Seattle, to spend money, whatever they buy, food, you know.
Well, there has been talk of making it year-round. For example, if we were just gonna talk about it, maybe we wanted to make Sundays year-round.
Sunday would be the day to make it different.
I know that it would be, do we have figures from Kitsap Transit? I mean, one reason I think they dropped Sundays is they
They
felt
would
that
have to
Sundays was
agree.
not a lucrative day, or it was the least used day.
Well, they have to,
So,
They have to have
a
Bus
bus.
yeah,
We
Yeah.
don't have a bus on Sunday.
yeah.
so.
Yeah,
They
all
want-
of
they
them.
don't like-
Help us
I can
with
give you our
this.
numbers without even calling the service development director. Our ridership on Sunday is 0.
For no, but for the foot ferry, what was the foot ferry on Sundays?
I have no idea. It's been several years.
No, I would imagine that it was probably the lowest day, so it made the
And I
most
do have
sense
those
as well.
numbers.
Okay.
Charlotte did give those to me here, so the last couple.
So you guys are thinking, have us add that and pay it just like we do these festival weekends? Add Sundays ourselves and
Well, we have to figure out how much that would cost.
yeah, that'd be huge. because I mean, all
Yeah, well,
these
no,
Sunday
I'm
hours-
not promoting that.
No,
Fred just
I
suggested.
just wanted to bring up the topic that is something that
Oh,
some people
okay,
brought up.
because I think that'd be gigantic.
Well, no,
amount of
it would be 3 times at least of what we're, at least, assuming that we have a Labor Day every quarter, that would bring a lot.
Oh, and you
And we
won't.
don't, yeah.
And that is something that I spoke with Kitsap Harbor Tours just a little bit, and learned a little bit about transportation, not a lot, but again, the Friday and Saturday night service, some of the, some of the establishments downtown think it's important for it to go till later, and I said, well, it would be more cost effective if you just hired a water taxi to take people back and forth. But apparently
The
that,
problem with that is they can't use the dock.
well, they can't use the dock, and Kitsap Transit owns that route. There's a whole series of other
Reasons why not.
rules of why you can't do that.
And I think I've heard mixed messages on this from the merchants saying, I thought we had several of them say they saw no increase or decrease into their
Oh, we did.
business.
I did a survey of all of them, and
Well,
there
not
was,
all, but some.
Several
We'll
of
talk to
them.
the bistro.
But, you know, why are we paying $152 an hour, whatever it is, for the 2 hours on Saturday night when nobody's riding that?
No, it's-
$300
right.
an hour, and nobody's riding that ferry to spend money in our shops downtown on Saturday night. I don't think.
Well, it's our shops open even for them.
Yeah.
Until that time.
Well, that's-
And, you know,
that's
there's
the
all-
whole-
You know, there's all those pieces we still need to get all
Right,
together on the
that's
same
the
page.
whole point, is our merchants on Friday night, many of them are open till 8. And the ferry already, the last one leaves here at 8:30 and leaves the other side at 8:45. We've already covered the bulk of the merchants, so you're just talking about some eating establishments and drinking establishments, that's all you're talking about. And on Saturday, most of our merchants are closing at 6. Kitsap Transit already runs it till,
7:30. Saturday.
on Saturday does it
Yeah.
go? They're already meeting the needs of all of our merchants except the eating establishments.
A couple restaurants and pubs.
Right.
And I
That's
don't,
true.
and I don't think their patronage is writing that fare.
That is
It
correct.
looked like it right at this point.
Well, I interviewed them. Well, at least I interviewed Moondogs and Amy's and,
But not the 110 or the Bistro. But
right,
I
because
think
they
you're
weren't
right.
open when I was
They
down
would
there.
probably like it to go later than the 10, and even Saturday is twice as many as Friday, but you're right.
So we will move on. Thank you very much, Brandy.
So-
I think, for my point of view, it's ask them if they want to just duplicate what we've done the last, 2
What their
years.
preferences. what
And
their
then find out what
contributions.
their hours,
If they have an hour preference,
yeah.
maybe extending Sunday an hour to an hour to instead of Friday, Saturday or something.
And then
Um,
I'll ask them that, and then just one thing, it should not change anything, they have not come back to me and say, you guys cannot do this, or there's another process you have to follow and play. But towards about a month or two ago, we did get contacted by DNR, and DNR said that, because Mark and I were talking about it, and we thought that the path down there was part of the city. Well, apparently it was transferred over to Kitsap Transit's part of the property. And so, we need to get a hold of Kitsap Transit. DNR is working with Kitsap Transit to see if Kitsap Harbor Tours can even enter to a sublease, because they're interpreting that it's a sublease off of a sublease. And so, I'm just waiting to hear back from DNR. They wanted a copy of our lease with Kitsap Harbor Tours, and they wanted a copy of, Mark provided them a map
Our
of what we used to
agreement.
lease. So, just kinda,
So what are you saying? We may not be able to have any,
we may have
Additional
to,
service
normally
paid for
what
by us?
we do,
maybe?
I think there's gonna be another step in the process. I don't think that they're gonna stop us, but I don't know, I'm assuming DNR's probably not gonna just give it to me, 2 weeks later after I give it to them. So the process is after I get, what I first do is get a hold of Kitsap Harbor Tours, find out if they're interested in partnering with us again. And then they say yes, and then they say, let me contact Kitsap Transit and see if I can use their docks. And then after that, they get back to me, Kitsap Harbor Tours, and I say, okay, so I don't know at that point if I need to contact DNR or if Kitsap Transit and Harbor Tours are gonna contact DNR, so.
So DNR is looking at the two contracts to see, giving us a legal opinion? Is that what they're doing?
I don't know.
I
just
think
asked
they
me.
have to get.
It sounds like that's what they're doing. It sounds like they're gonna give us a legal opinion on two contracts that
Because technically it's their,
are county contracts.
I don't know.
Only other thing I wanted to throw out there is that, as you know, the Annapolis market was on Sundays, and there was the idea, what if the ferry could do a triangle of Bremerton, Annapolis,
Yeah,
Port Orchard?
and Kitsap Harbor Tours let us know that financially was,
It would be a
it'd be
different,
difficult.
it would be a different amount, and it would be a different schedule.
yeah.
That might be one way to absorb the 4 hours into something.
Well, in that boat, they can't always get, so
They
it
were
would be
sure
hit
we
and
could
miss
get
on their
the-
ridership,
Right.
because they have to have the big boat to make that loop,
The peat. They need
Yeah.
the peat.
and they don't know when they're gonna have the peak, so.
Right, and what's important is to keep the schedule, the hour and half hour from Port Orchard and the quarter, and, because when you start messing with those, that's, you're gonna lose ridership. It's gonna become confusing to people. But the other thing that I would just let the committee know is, this year again, the Port Orchard Bay Street Association offered complimentary foot ferry passes. And that we distribute basically through the ports and also at outlets down in Bremerton. And this year, again, 145 of the free coupons were used. And we don't care, the Port Orchard Bay Street Association does not care when they're used. It's just, they just want people to go back and forth. And what's interesting is 28 coupons were used on the extended hours for Sundays and the Friday or Saturday nights. And so then, 122, did I do the math wrong? Were done on regular foot ferry hours, not the extended hours. So again, the bulk of the usage is the hours that Kitsap Transit's running the foot ferry right now. And most of those go through the port. Most of those are given at the marinas. So, thank you very much.
Right.
And Nick's gonna talk to us about our wayfinding system.
Well, I brought the big posters up.
Okay.
And, I want you to know I saved us a bunch of money by buying some foam board at Lowe's and cutting it myself rather than the $300 they wanted to print and mount these to
Oh, jeez.
architectural poster board. The three alternatives that are going to be presented at City Council tomorrow night are,
Oh, I
I'm going to
haven't
give you a
seen
sneak
that.
preview. So you'll notice that each of these, the logo text is different on each of the poster boards, as are the sign programs. So this is one logo on one sign. This was, so this is an iteration that would be like a weathered steel as an element where it's layered, and you have the weathered steel behind the probably powder coated aluminum sign that would then be have the graphic, which is an adhesive type of printed material. The logo has this wave action that's a green and blue below the orchard, and so this would actually be the extent of the logo, is just the port orchard with the little wave underneath it, and it's got a subtle compass rose.
The other thing that I would just say to our committee is the logo, or where you see the port orchard with the little wavy signs under it, you will see different logos in each of the three, and those can be taken out and put inside either of the designs.
Is there a black
You'll
and white
understand.
version
Yeah, you'll see a black and white application of all of these. This is the next iteration. It's got the same font, but instead of having waves below, there's a kind of a split word orchard where it indicates the motion of the water. This would be a sign. This is a board form concrete that would have an etched, very subtle compass rose in it. But I think the nice thing about this is it's being on white. It's a very visible logo, and I know we went back and forth on the color combinations of this quite a bit, but it's kind of a dark gray port with the orchard, and then all the sign applications and fonts that would go with it. And then the next sign is actually the same sign construction with a slightly different logo.
And different colors.
Yeah, the colors are a little bit lighter, but the port orchard is now all in one line, and it's still got the split wave action, and there's actually it's a more complex wave that's going through the word. But I think that the consultant's feeling there's some advantages to having the linear port orchard as opposed to stacking it. But the other thing I'll say about these other ones is the cursive port is meant to look like kind of the whole maritime script that you'd see written on the back of a boat in cursive that would be hand painted in it. So it's sort of looks like that. But those are the alternatives, and the council is going to be asked whether there should be some sort of public process to have a selection of these, or whether council wants to decide directly. But also ultimately, council needs to make the decision on which one of these we're going to go forward with, so that we can put together the bid specs for signs, and also get all of the logo materials finalized and ready to use. They'll deliver the logo materials digitally to us on a disc that we can then, with instructions on how to use them, and then they'll go forward and finish the wayfinding signage, which will include detailed drawings of all the signs and how they're to be constructed, so that we have bid-ready sign packages.
Let's see the first one again.
And Ken, the architect who's been doing all these, really wants a presentation, because he wants all of the council to understand and all the citizens to understand the thought process and the basic process that goes into putting these together. There are very specific reasons. It's not just, oh, we think this looks good. He's gone to a lot of professional integrity to make these.
So anyway, you'll be seeing that in detail. We'll hand out 11 by 17 prints of everything that we had professionally printed, so the colors come out correctly. And
Is that tomorrow or no?
that's tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow night we'll discuss
Is he
that.
gonna present too?
He is,
Oh,
yes.
good. Okay.
So you'll have a presentation tomorrow, followed by a discussion on how to go about selecting this. And, you know, I think if you want to have a public selection, my recommendation, and this may actually be a good way to get people to start following us on Facebook, would be to have all three concepts on Facebook where people can like the concept that they are the alternative that they prefer. And maybe council wants to say that, you know, we're going to have a council vote, and whoever wins on Facebook will get 2 votes in its favor, rather than having the public decide it. They just sort of influence council, and council members can still vote. I don't know how you want to handle it, but anyway.
Any
So
thoughts?
I like the first one. I don't vote for that one.
I like the color of that, it just,
I like the.
I'm only one. I don't know that artist.
Well, our,
It'll be interesting to hear the reasoning behind it, though.
yeah,
it's very
even
detailed.
even the color selections and how you came about the color combinations it's very specific why those colors are chosen. So.
Yeah, none of it was casual,
I wouldn't think that it would be.
yeah.
I think the biggest question you have to decide is, do you want a public process? Include the public in the process someday. And I think our contractor said probably that's not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can share them.
Spin every which way and completely reinvent the wheel, and I got the impression we can't afford to do that because he's.
Well, we can't afford to. We can't afford to have the public have input in designing this. But in terms of picking one of the three, yeah, there's no changes. It's pick one of the three, and you know, it's not a we don't like any of them type
He
of
says
thing.
that's where it gets to be kind of a sticky wicket. Is
Yeah, some people are gonna say we don't like any of
we
these.
don't like it, we want this. We want to add this. Or we want
Yeah.
it to look like this. And
That
it's
goes
too
in
late.
the other pile.
Well,
Yeah, so
we
there's-
can't afford that kind of place.
Or the other pile.
Yeah, so that's where it takes some leadership from council on kind of saying how this is gonna go and.
Right, and the other piece of that is, we did involve,
Representatives.
the committee had public on it.
Oh, yeah, I understand. I've been at every meeting, but that
Yeah.
isn't.
Oh,
that
no,
isn't
no,
what
I
we're talking
understand
about.
what you're
It's that
saying,
The rest of
but-
the public hasn't been involved, and they might.
Right,
want
but
to.
we did engage citizens on the front end, so.
Yeah.
That's the story, that we didn't give.
Okay, and we will go on now to our economic development comprehensive plan.
The economic development element, we have revised the existing draft, which it's a relatively short element, I think about 8 pages. And we have updated it following completion of surveys concerning the economic development element, which I'm pleased to say that we had much greater participation than in previous surveys that we've done. We've got more people following this process than at any time thus far. And so we had 149 people participate compared to 73 in the initial public outreach round. And so I think it's a combination of having the people that we've already talked to continue to weigh in, and then really engaging the business community and others who are interested in economic development issues for the city. So I had Scott Bonjukian, our intern, he compiled all of the data from the survey results into a report, which I just wanted to provide for your information. We're not doing anything with this report other than translating it into updated policies and goals for the economic development element. So I think that there's some interesting information in there, and I think that for one thing, the survey, even though there's more participation, it sort of confirms that we're on the right track with the other things that we're doing, and then provides new input into how we should prioritize different efforts. And I think the really interesting thing is that we're talking about centers of local importance, and that's going to be coming forward as a comp plan amendment for the council to consider this year. They've actually gone in and prioritized which ones of these centers are the most important to you, and downtown is overwhelmingly the most important area to citizens, but the 2 centers located along Bethel and then Lower Mile Hill are the next most important, and McCormick Woods and the industrial park and the county government campus are not as important. They also went through and they were asked about projects that came out of the economic development plan from 2004 and which ones were most important, and I thought it was good to get public input on prioritizing different projects. And again, the waterfront path and the boardwalk came out as the #1 priority for citizens. And then second was actually undergrounding power lines downtown, which was identified in that plan, and which would require the city to work with PSE on completing a project like that, and that would likely be as part of some future downtown streetscape improvements where you take the power underground and you improve the sidewalks and deal with the marquee and all of those issues that are sort of not at the forefront of the priority list right now. They're seen as very important for downtown redevelopment.
I have a question, and I'm trying to remember the question that was on the survey, but when you talk about the citywide projects to complete, and they voted the Bay Street pedestrian path as important, did you give them a, was that taking it all the way out to Annapolis, or was that stopping it? I mean, were they given a map? Did they know what the boundaries were?
I believe they were given a map, but I'd have to go back and double check. I can't remember.
The graph is very nice about showing the difference, but if you look at it another way, they're all threes.
Oh, yeah, they're very,
Yeah,
very
they-
close
Very
together.
close.
There's, yeah.
Yeah, and I think some of this is probably somebody say love it, hate it, and it ends up in the
Right.
middle, but some of them are slightly ahead.
Yeah.
And so,
No, there's not a great variance.
yeah, and that's interesting too, because a lot of these are projected, and it only goes from 3 to 4 when the question was 1 to 5, and everything fell into that middle range and is very close. So you have to present it in a way that makes, the results distinguishable. So, then the other thing, I thought the survey of where people are shopping was helpful, and also which events people are attending and are interested in. I think that was interesting, especially that the farmers market was way ahead of the rest of the events. But the cruise, of course, is very big. So anyway, if you guys have questions about this, or if you have suggestions for the economic development element, we are getting ready to take this to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, but there is an opportunity to get some input on this, and so if any of you want to email me directly with feedback or suggestions, we'd be happy to present those to the Planning Commission so that they can be considered in the recommendation that they ultimately make.
Is this new, or is this?
It's based on the old,
It's old one
yeah,
updated?
I think the graph has been inserted because we have new data, but other than that, it's most of the same goals. We've revised them to make sure they're consistent with the feedback that we've received, and we may have added a few, but I can get this to you and strike through and underline if you'd like it as well. Just email me and let me know.
So this is our Title 14.
What's that?
This is our original Title 14. Is
Oh, that's the next issue. That's going to be the next issue on the
Oh,
agenda.
okay.
The other thing that a comment I'm going to make about this survey is with the emphasis on downtown and people thinking downtown is important. I don't think we've presented a vision to the citizens on what the other areas could look like.
Mm-hmm.
I think people react to what they can see.
Yeah.
And so that's just, and those are just informational, and so our direction is, if we have any questions on either one of these, to get them to Nick. And then the economic development piece, that's gonna be part of the comp plan update this year?
No, that'll
No,
be in 2016.
That's in
so
that's just,
you'll be considering it. You'll actually have it come across your desk next summer or fall
okay.
to vote on, and then we have to submit it to Commerce and to PSRC for comments. They may make us make some revisions,
right, okay,
and we'll get it done in early 2016.
okay. Is there anything else on that?
Nope.
Discussion item, okay, and then we'll go on to your subdivision ordinance.
Well, this is an issue that it doesn't really fit with any one of the committees, but I think it has implications for development in Port Orchard. Carol Morris, the interim attorney, I think you've probably heard, but she was commissioned by AWC to actually write a model city code that all cities could adopt and make their own, but that is legally sound in terms of respecting property rights and also creating a process which is going to indemnify the city in the event that it gets sued, that it's done everything correctly. I've had a lot of struggles with our subdivision code that we have now, and so I was bringing this forward for discussion, but we would like to bring this forward to council in the near future. This code not only includes large subdivision, it includes short plats, boundary line adjustments, which we currently don't have any code for boundary line adjustments. And right now we have developers that sometimes go record things without having them reviewed by the city. And so they're finalized, but they may not conform to the city's code. So creating a process for that. Our short plat code right now, it doesn't specify that the improvements have to be constructed before we sign the final short plat. And so in recent years, we've signed short plats where no improvements have been made, and then they come in for building permits and don't want to construct their improvements, and we don't have any hammer to say that, no, you have to install this private road and this sewer line or whatever is needed to serve those lots. It's been real problematic, and I think these are going to be good for developers because it's very clear and creates a process that, that if they get something approved, the risk of it getting appealed by an outside party is low, and then the city is also protected because it has done things consistent with state law. So anyway, I don't want to get into the details of this, but I wanted to provide it for you and let you know that it's my intent and my desire to bring this forward, and I would like your support. If you have questions about it, feel free to ask.
Do we know what the cost would be?
The cost to use this is free. She's just giving us the ordinance. We're going to have to format it. There are some cross-referencing issues in changing the name, inserting the name Port Orchard, and it references to other, like the street standards definition. It needs to refer to our engineer's manual, so we have to go in and manually type in all these references. But that's a relatively easy task compared to actually writing this whole chapter.
Right.
Which ours was actually written not that long ago, but it has so many problems and inconsistencies in it that it makes it really hard to administer.
And it wouldn't do any good to provide our original Title 14.
No, the whole thing needs to be
because it's totally
next.
different. I mean, this is completely new.
Yeah.
And this is, again, free to use.
Yeah, and she's, this isn't the only thing we're going to bring forward, but I think it's the most pressing because we have a couple of subdivisions in process right now, and if this is approved before those go to the hearing examiner, we can actually apply these because you only vest to the zoning, you don't vest to the process, but this will make the process much easier for the hearing examiner and for staff to review and evaluate to be consistent with our code.
If anybody has adopted this more or less, because we don't have to adopt it word for word, we can change it all the way through to fit.
We
city
can, yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
But did you ask her if anybody's
It's been provided to several cities. I don't know how many have adopted, but I know that I think this largely follows what Gig Harbor has because she was their city attorney, and a lot of what she wrote, is similar to that. But this is only the subdivision portion. It's not zoning or design guidelines or anything like that.
But I want to go back to what the mayor just said. If we change any of the verbiage in here, other than making references specifically to Port Orchard, do we compromise the integrity of the code?
Well, I think you have to get the opinion of the attorney on
We'd
that.
have to send it back through for her
Yeah.
look at it, just like we would if she hadn't had any part in it. We'd still have her go through it all. And what we could easily do is we could just put in red the changes that we made and then say, would you look at this and see if it changed it drastically or changed it,
So, Tim, do you have an opinion for or against, or?
I haven't read this all the way through. There's a few things there that I don't quite understand, why that was used. There's different terms and stuff, and but I think it's really worthwhile to at least look at it because Nick, you've looked all the way through it, haven't you? Read all the way through
I've read through this once, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. My biggest worry before I read it was that that there's too many other things that are weird in our code that aren't gonna fit together with this and make things work. But now that I've read it, I think it's actually going to be relatively simple to plug this in and make it work. My main question is, where do we put it in the code? And it seems like everything right now is in Title 16, but typically development regulations and process are in one title, and zoning is in another title, and design guidelines are in another title. And it would be nice to sort of isolate those things in the code to make them more manageable, just so it's not such a big document. If developers are wanting information about zoning, they can just not have to scroll through all this other stuff as they're trying to find what they're looking for. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for me at this point.
And going back to what you said earlier, that it sounds like we've had a problem with some short plats in our city.
Yeah.
But this would address them.
Well, it's not going to address what we've already done.
No, but going forward,
Yeah.
yeah, because we've had some miserable short plats that were completely.
Well, this isn't going to change the
Compliance.
layout guidelines.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to make specifications about what something looks like, that's not the issue that's being addressed here. This is addressing the process and the criteria for review, which says that, right now there's nothing in our subdivision code that says that the city has reviewed this and found that it has adequate provision for street access. I mean, it doesn't actually say that. It's very limited on its conditions of granting approval versus requiring denial for the hearing examiner. And so this is going to clarify that. I think, give you an example if I can real quick. Yeah, so if you go to page 18, this is for short plats. It says criteria of approval. And the applicant for a short subdivision must demonstrate that the application complies with all of the following. And the sixth one down is drainage improvements. Seventh one, roads. Eighth one, extension policies for getting easements to the other side of a property. None of that stuff is in our code. It talks about flooding, and that if something is in a flood zone, that the elevations are marked properly on the face of the plat. And those are items that just currently aren't in our code, even though we have this ordinance that FEMA made us adopt. The relationship between the subdivision code and that FEMA ordinance, it just doesn't exist in the code. They're just independent, kind of, not tied together.
So this roads clause is new, or?
Yeah, there's something in the existing one, but it is not worded in a way that makes it very useful.
Yeah, we've had bad circulation.
So anyway, I would suggest reading this, and I'm working with my staff on filling in the blanks here, and then I have to send, once I've filled in the blanks and can show those in track changes mode to the attorney, she'll prepare the ordinance and get it ready to go forward, and we have to, I think there's a 60-day comment period we have to do, and we're gonna have to run SEPA on it, so maybe by the first of the year, this will be coming up.
So basically, you'll be asking to replace,
Yeah.
the title.
Well, and I think we're going to take it out of 16 and maybe make this Title 19 as a new standalone chapter.
Oh, okay.
And then as we update zoning regulations in the future, maybe eventually that'll become Title 20. But that's a much more complicated thing because zoning regulations are specific to Port Orchard, and there's not some universal format that you can follow for writing that. But I think there is a lot of work that's needed there. So anyway, hopefully this will make development in the city easier and just more clear for developers. Oh, the other thing is there's a binding site plan chapter in here, which a binding site plan is like a commercial subdivision. When you want to create tracts that is like building A, building B, but be able to sell the property associated with that, that's not usually done with a subdivision. It's done under the state statutes for binding site plans. And so Home Depot, for instance, when they applied to the county, they applied for a binding site plan. Now they came to us and they said, well, we're interested in possibly amending the site plan, but we don't even have a provision for binding site plans at all, so how can we amend something that our code doesn't authorize in the first place? And so for the sake of being consistent with the county and what the county may approve in the future in UGAs, and if we annex things, it's important that we have, a complete ordinance for the division of land.
And are we going to find more of these issues where we have deficiencies in our current code?
Yeah, and she's got, for instance, a SEPA ordinance, which ours needs to be replaced. She has there's actually a chapter that spells out how you go about amending your code and what the process is for public hearings and appeals of development regulations that you pass, which we currently are deficient there. And so she wants to change how we go about amending the comp plan and how we go about amending development regulations, so that there's a set process, that we meet public participation requirements of state law, and that it's laid out very clearly in the code. And so that's something. There's also an enforcement of zoning violations chapter that she's suggesting, because right now everything that we do is under nuisance, but we have very limited control when it's, for instance, we had a subdivision recently where they were required to put in street trees, and 6 years later they went through and cut down all the street trees. And fortunately the developer was willing to work with us to get those replaced, but we didn't actually have the teeth in our zoning code to say that this is a condition of your subdivision approval, and we have to enforce that into the future. So it's, things like that we need to clean up.
Okay,
So
thank you.
even though it's all written, it's not going to be real easy. It's going to be pretty time consuming, but we're going to work through it as we can.
Okay.
So next.
Is 640 Bay Street.
Okay, in your packet for council tomorrow night, there is a item, I don't know if you've seen it, but it talks about the extended coverage title insurance on Bay Street, which the building is torn down. I don't know, I think it's probably all cleaned up by now. I haven't seen it since
Yeah,
Friday.
there's still a little rubble around, and they're doing a lot of handwork now, but.
Anyway, so I think the work is almost done there. The engineer that was inspecting the wall for stability did recommend that we put some ecology blocks behind that to sort of buttress the existing walls, and also to drill some drain holes into the wall to let the water out. But I think we're in good shape for closing. But what we found was that in the agreement, we specified extended term or extended coverage title insurance, but that requires a survey. It didn't specify which party would pay for the survey, and because the title insurance coverage benefits us as the buyer, it's probably our responsibility to pay for it, but we wanted to get council authorization before we do that. And really, I think the purpose of the extended coverage insurance is that we're buying a foreclosed property, and there's potentially, with ownership issues and things being sorted out in the court, I think it was the attorney's recommendation to have that coverage at the time, so that if new things emerge on the property in the future that are a cloud on the title, that the insurance company has us covered. So I think that it would still be the recommendation to keep that policy, but it's going to cost us $4,500 more than we expected for, closing the purchase of the property. So we're asking council to discuss that tomorrow. And the alternative is either pay $4,500 or go to standard title insurance, which you're not covered beyond the closing date.
No lot lines,
Yeah.
lot lines are not delineated, and therefore, we won't be notified of all the easements that are
Exactly.
associated with it.
Yeah. So,
The only thing is, I thought it was 642 Bay for some reason. I guess it is 640, the address.
I think it's 640, but
Okay.
It used
Were
to
there-
be 642, 640, and 120 Fredericks, and then 642 got erased.
Because
at
640 is earlier. Okay.
Some point in time.
So it was two lots.
yeah, and the
Okay.
apartments may have been off of Frederick, whereas the building was off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was 642. I thought, okay.
So basically what we're doing is we're taking our purchase price and adding the extended policy. We're taking our purchase price of $148 and adding a
Well, and
$4,500.
yeah, and there's already closing costs that I think we're in for half of closing costs, which are in
Right.
addition to 148. So we're adding 4,500 to the closing costs, which are on
Right.
top of 148.
Right, and then we have our attorney's fees on top of that. So I was just trying to get to
Yeah.
this will be it's just part of doing business and getting the transaction done.
Yeah,
And
correct.
then hoping to recover that in the sale.
Who's in you remember we cut the walls down? Get 'em-
Yeah.
Uh,
We're paying for the fence that's going to go in, and I think
So
it's,
that's an additional.
yeah, and that's going to just come out of our existing public works budget. They're going to put in that as
Right, what happened is we had to cut the wall down after the soils engineer said it's gonna stay. First of all, we weren't sure, because we might have had to remove it, but it's gonna stay with buttresses, which are ecology blocks, just going in a oblique angle to the wall. And then we needed to cut a wall off. The contractor wasn't gonna cut it off smooth. It was all rough.
The one on Frederick?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we had,
It looks nice,
we
actually.
had a concrete sawing outfit come in and cut it off flat,
Oh,
so
okay.
we can now attach some fence, because you really don't want people walking down along Frederick
Oh, yeah.
or staggering and falling into a
Right.
hole. So,
Right.
but that's something that won't come out of this, like Nick says, it'll come out of the street.
Yeah, yeah. The other issue that may come up, which we haven't resolved yet, I don't know if you remember the driveway that went alongside the building to their side parking lot. It had an archway over the top of it, and what we didn't realize is that the archway on the Chinese restaurant building side was supported by this cinder block wall, and it was determined that that cinder block wall was unstable and needed to come down. But when we took it down, we realized the Chinese restaurant doesn't have weather protection on its building there, and so you'll see some.
They just brought their siding right up to the concrete.
Yeah, so when they re-sided the building, it
Sorry,
was.
that's a spot, not this.
Yeah.
one.
Oh, yeah. He's got a picture of it. So I'm not sure. We need to talk internally about what's done, whether that's that building owner's responsibility, whether it's the seller's responsibility, or whether it's the city's responsibility, and whether something gets worked out. I really don't know.
Well, they're doing a nice job, whoever's gonna end up paying for it. It's
Yeah.
a nice
So they
job.
covered it with some.
They covered it with some.
Have they covered it already?
Yeah.
Okay, I hadn't seen it
It
since
looks
Friday.
like blocks,
Okay,
you know,
There's a membrane or something on it.
right.
gotcha. So yeah, so we may hear from that building owner, and he may ask something of the city, but we haven't gotten too far with that. But just so you're aware, that's a potential.
And of course, the survey will show exactly how close to his building is our property. And I think it's right up next,
I
Is
would
he
guess
built
so.
to his
I'm
property?
guessing
Probably.
that there is
That's
no
what I wondered.
lot line there. I mean, it's his building and our property.
Because did they have an easement? They used to park in that area there.
You know, that, I don't know, Fred, that would, see, that's probably a good reason to go with the full survey, because we'll find out if we have an easement, and if we have to leave
I
area.
think that building was built to the lot lines would be
Yeah.
my guess. But.
So, I mean, all of that will come out with the or the additional title policy, or should.
Yeah.
I mean, at least it'll be will be noticed.
If it doesn't come out, we're protected.
Right.
So anyway,
But
that's
a good
that's
question.
coming.
We may have an easement there for that building. you know.
Yeah.
Somebody else may have entered into it, the bank or any of the other owners.
So then if we have an easement, that will reduce the amount of property that can be developed.
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
look at the easement back.
Right. We'd have to wait
Whatever
and see
that
what it
looks
is
like.
first.
Right.
So anyway, but the good news is the building is down, and we're it's one
Already
less.
smells better.
Yeah. Oh God, it was
really
bad down
does.
there. I was coughing like crazy.
Yeah, when they got rid of that tile, I was going, ooh, it starts to smell better already, because it smelled like burnt, burnt
Yeah.
wiring and burnt.
No, I think it was a good decision to purchase that. Next,
I've not heard any negative.
Yeah,
And I've
it's-
heard about 20, 30 comments of people going, boy, we're glad you guys did that. We're so glad that you took that down. Now what are you gonna do? I said, relax, wait a minute.
Well, no, they're asking about Myers now. Why didn't you give that to Myers?
Yeah, why don't, I said, oh, there's a little difference. That one's privately owned now. And there is an owner
It's
standing.
not in receivership.
Right, it's not.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, I'll mention that to the full council. I haven't heard one person say anything. Oh, yes, there was one negative
I've heard
comment.
one negative, yeah.
It was the parrot lady.
Oh.
And she said, well, she doesn't know that they went ahead and had all asbestos removed long before they ever disturbed anything. And they must have documentation too.
Yeah, we have that.
Yeah. But that was her complaint. Well, the city's making a big old dusty asbestosy mess over there, but she doesn't know.
It rained that day.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's exactly wrong. We did not do anything.
Yeah. The asbestos abatement was complete a couple weeks before the demolition began, and we have a report in our file from the asbestos company saying that it's certified as
But
clean.
that was just an offhand comment she made. That was the only negative I heard from it.
No, now let's get something in there and cover our money and make something good for the city. Our next budget, or our next item is, again, the preliminary budget. And if we go to the community development section, the starts.
And then it's towards the end of that, the gray pages.
The gray pages are the supplemental. Right, and we have supplemental, we also have just the regular, budget items. And I believe I had, just a couple of questions, if you could explain them to me. We had $20,000 for professional services for backup inspection services. Is that, can you just explain what that is?
Yeah, so we contract with Code Pros, and they cover inspections on days when John is out of the office or when we have so much work that we can't get everything done. This year we vastly exceeded our budgeted amount, and I think we've already spent about 15 or 16,000 to date, and he's still going to be covering for John's vacation. He's actually out, I believe, hunting this weekend. $6,000 wasn't nearly enough to cover John's absences. He typically doesn't take a lot of vacation, but he's maxed out, so he's got use or lose vacation time. And if he gets injured or anything else like that, we wanted to make sure we had a little bit more robust budget.
So that's what that is.
Yeah.
That's for his backup.
Correct.
And to keep us moving forward if we have situations.
Yeah.
And then we have some comp plan stuff in here that is, I'm assuming new for this year because we have the big comp plan update that we're
Correct.
doing. And then we have the 30,000 for abatements. Do we have buildings that we're thinking we may want to abate?
Well, I don't know that we have anything that we're going to totally knock down, but there is something underway right now that we're probably going to have to go in and board up a building, and so what's budgeted this year some of that may get used in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to have Public Works actually do the work, but they're going to have to buy plywood and bolt things through on both sides because you've got windows broken out, you've got transients living in the house, the police have recovered stolen merchandise there's drugs, so we do have one that is imminent and that needs to be locked down so that people can't enter the building anymore. But beyond that sort of thing, I don't have anything in mind.
Well, in answer though to your question, the full council wanted that in there, and it wanted to be ongoing.
Yeah.
Right, and last year it
We
was
don't
more,
know.
and my question was, is that enough?
It really depends. I mean, I think the fact that the economy is doing a little bit better, some of this stuff that's been sitting may get picked up and redeveloped, through the private
Right.
channels.
It's hard to
that exist.
answer that question,
Yeah.
because we don't know which one might need abatement.
Yeah,
Is that on Morgan or is that Eagle Crest area?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I can find out for you and tell you afterwards.
But then to have too much sitting in there is
It's-
neglecting a whole bunch of things that need
They
money.
need to be done too, right. You want this to be,
Placeholder, basically.
and
I'd like to
accurate.
be, project driven, which houses do we need to raise and which ones?
So then, I think what I'd like to do with this supplemental ask is just let Nick go through that and make sure we're on board to support.
Well, and there was the one economic development project under the clerk's budget too, which was
Right, the wayfinding.
well, and
Oh.
I'm talking about the position for promotion and economic
Marketing,
development,
yeah.
the marketing,
Right.
yeah. So that was one of the ones
That's
that
up in
seemed to
here.
really pertain to
Okay.
this committee.
Okay,
Um,
that was up here.
There it is.
Right, on
Is that
page
the events
9.
coordinator? Next one.
Yeah, on page 19.
Yeah, so that's one of the supplemental items that staff put in the budget but did not make the mayor's budget, and so right now the budget isn't balanced unless you either take something out of the budget or find funding or reduce the ending cash balances to pay for something like that.
So it's my understanding, because I'm new to the budget process, that everything that's in gray, all of these supplemental items, are not included in the budget, and we will have to find funding for them. Is that correct?
Well, either that or I
Redo
think
something else,
I think
or-
there is an ending cash balance, and so it becomes, is there more ending cash than is required to have the cushion that you need to operate the city? And if so, there may be some gap between what you need and what you have projected in the budget, and so then it becomes reduce ending cash balance and add this to the budget. in which case you have less of a cushion at the end of the year.
This particular position, I know that I was the one who brought this forward. And I had, in my mind, I had envisioned this job could just be 8 hours a week. But I didn't understand.
Which position are you looking at?
Okay, I
There's
guess-
3 or 4 here that are,
Okay, are you on page 19?
no.
Okay, go to page 19. Actually, if you also go to page 17, this is an administrative assistant, and this is completely different, but this is how I saw the marketing working out. I thought that if we had someone initially 8 hours a week, because I knew that we had one administrative assistant that was working 32 hours a week. And I thought if we added a day to her, she could make these things up.
Or someone else could.
Or someone else
Yes.
could. And obviously, when it got into the discussion within the department, they had an 8-hour need that took away for where I thought the money would, where I thought that those jobs would go. And they saw it as a bigger position, added a few more responsibilities to it, and made it 20 hours a week. So, then the question becomes, in my mind, some of these things I think have to be done, and I think need to be placed somewhere. Some of the items, maybe are marginal and we don't need to find the funding for. But this is how it's coming forward. Some of the things that I think need to happen is the event process, the public event applicant process. We need someone to know that the affected businesses are in fact notified. We need someone to know that we need to let merchants know that an event is going to happen. We need to make sure that the events are posted on Visit Kitsap. We need a point of contact in the city for various organizations to know who they can call. Anyway. I don't know if anyone else has any feeling on it.
I am actually disappointed that it has become a 20-hour thing, because I still think that something could be done with 8 hours a week. And that was originally what I thought too. I'm more inclined to make this an 8-hour thing and support this on the previous page, page 17.
Or you can combine them into
Or
one.
you can,
Yeah.
yeah,
We have a 32-hour-a-week employee now.
yes.
And this 8 hours is gonna go to make them 40.
Yep.
And 120 was a new part-time position.
Right. And I didn't, when I brought it forward, I just looked at her and thought, we could add 8 hours there and then shift the work
Yes,
however it needs
yes.
to be done.
To get that done.
And it's become, I think there's at least 8 hours of work here a week that needs to be done. But when I have to make choices, I think there are needs within Nick's department that I would like to see funded before this.
Page 54 or whatever.
Back on 54.
So now
65.
we can go to 65, and let's let Mark walk us through
Nick.
these.
Could you guys
The
pick
other
a
guy.
smaller fonts?
I can
Is
pick
this
fonts.
6-point font?
Yeah, my eyes were like, is it better with or without?
You young people.
So the first item is a code enforcement pickup truck, which probably doesn't pertain to economic development too much, but essentially what we have is a code enforcement officer drives an old 2001 Chevy Blazer that was passed down from the police department. The problem is it's got the spare tire on the back that you have to swing open. You lift up the glass, which is a split tailgate thing, and then she has to throw signs into the back, which she has had shoulder replacement surgery within the last year. So it's a 14-year-old vehicle, and it's also a non-functional vehicle for the task. I think she picked up 600 signs in a month and a half span, going around, getting things that are stuck to telephone poles, signs that are stuck into the ground that are out in the right of way, and she basically goes around a couple times a week, picks those things up, throws them into the truck. If it's raining, it's wet stuff going into the vehicle as opposed to going into the bed of a pickup truck. So, it's a combination. The vehicle is old, and we're probably putting $2,000 to $3,500 into it a year at this point, combined with not being the right type of vehicle for the job that is being done. And so the proposal is to get a compact pickup truck that would be suitable for picking up signs as well as driving around for code enforcement activities. The next one is the Mind Mixer community software for engaging people online, and this is really a public participation issue. It's a way to give people a forum for discussion on the internet, much like Facebook does, but without the trolling that would typically go on, or the negative comments or comments that violate the rules of discussion, which are generally directed negatively at one person. Basically, it gives you the ability to flag things that violate the rules of your Mind Mixer site, but also to pose questions and media in a way that you can't currently do on Facebook or on other forums. And so the hope is that we'd get greater participation from working families who don't necessarily have time to participate in the public process by attending meetings or coming to workshops, because like Councilmember Cartwright, they have soccer practices to go to, and if they do come here, their kids are in shin guards and cleats. So anyway, that's a relatively small dollar item that I think will have a big return in terms of public participation, and we can also use kind of on the tail end of the comp plan update process, and also as we go out for input on transportation and the water sewer utilities and those things that we're doing next year that are also in the budget. The third item, it concerns the front desk position in my department, which also known as Lisa, who's at this table. And basically, she's 30 hours a week right now. And so this is, are you 32 or 30?
30.
Okay. Yeah, she's funded at 30 right now. The way the healthcare law is changing, I think that the cost of going from 30 to 40 next year is not very much, because well, depending on whether benefits kick in this year or next year, for 30-hour-a-week people, the cost may not be very much. And we get a lot out of it. Right now, we have to have other people covering the front desk for the first hour of the day, which means they're getting up and down, and it interrupts their ability to do the other things that they have to do. And it also, so we have currently Ellen covers for the first hour in the morning, and then Stephanie has to cover the lunch break hour, so that means staggered lunches. Okay, yeah, first 2 hours of the day. So this would basically give us full coverage at the front desk so that permits can be taken in and issued without people coming from their office to cover the front desk position. You have anything you want to add to that since you're here?
No.
Ellen's swamped.
Ellen's swamped, and since our other planner's been away, I've been doing full-time, and I can tell how much of a breather it is for everybody else. Because like this week, Ellen's gone, and so Kathy was up in the meeting, I'm gone, so Stephanie's had to cover while Kathy was here, and Kathy and Stephanie have to cover for the last 3 hours that I've been up here. And so it's just a
And I
lot.
think Ellen is here till 7 o'clock
Yeah.
a few times a week on a regular basis at this point
It's just
because
a
of
lot easier
permit
for
volume.
Ellen, because she can come in, immediately concentrate on her job instead of having to worry about phones and who's ringing the front counter and,
So that's a relatively small one in terms of the size of the ask. The next two are bigger, and I've split this into two positions. So currently we have a planning intern, and that's Scott, and he's in school, so he's only working 10 hours a week on average and is helping us with the comp plan. My proposal is to end the internship in June and hire a long-range planner as a full-time position to get us back to 3 planners, which is where we were as recently as 2010, when we actually didn't have a lot of development. Now we have a ton of development, and we're unable to do things like fix the sign ordinance, which has been on my list of things to do for a long time, but I don't have the staff to put towards it because we have so much current range planning to do. So this would be stopping the internship June 30th and then hiring a long-range planner on July 1st and creating that into a long-term position. So that's half the amount that it would cost next year, because next year it would be a fully funded position. But that would give us, a dedicated planner, which right now, Public Works, for instance, they don't have planning that helps with the 6-year street plan that has to be adopted every year. Mark just recently found out that all of his plans have to be part of the comprehensive plan, and there's nobody in his office to file those amendments to make sure that his documents that are required to get transportation money are getting through the process in planning, so that they can get into the budget as part of our capital spending request. So really, if we're going to have long-range planning, we need to have a long-range planner that's separate, and most cities do divide their planning department into short-range people and long-range people, because they're two totally different jobs. And the short-range only deal with the permits that come in and the licenses that have to be reviewed, and the long-range person is doing the comp plan, the annual amendments, as well as the long-term update, and then is also working on development regulation updates and more policy issues with council.
Well, you had 3 planners before. They weren't all full-time, were they?
They were at one time, but they were reduced. So I think the cuts came in probably 2011, and at that time they shifted Jennifer from full-time to being partially Public Works funded, because she worked on the capital facilities plan, and then she was grant funded, and then when the grant ran out, they said, well, you're a part-time employee, and that's sort of how things migrated from having 3 planners to 2 planners. And at that time, Stephanie was an assistant planner, and we had 2 associate planners. And so, and really the jobs didn't differ. It was really the pay scale that differed between them. They all basically did the same work, and just one of them had a lesser position. And so my proposal is to say, we need an associate planner that is long-range planning, and then we need 2 associate planners that are short-range.
And the short-range guys do permits, they do the
business licenses, marijuana applications, certificates of occupancy. Every building permit that comes in has a site plan review that has to take place for setbacks and other things. They inspect landscaping when it's installed to make sure it complies with the approved plan. They deal with the bonds that are put in place for maintenance and warranties. They do SEPA. They go before the hearing examiner. So basically, any project that happens in the city, a planner has to look at it and sign off on it.
Who does like these subdivisions?
Our associate planners.
They do all of that?
Yeah, so that would be short range.
Okay.
But basically, at this point in time, I mean, I have Scott, fortunately, for this comp plan, because, when I had 2 planners, they were all doing short range stuff. They don't have time other than, Tom was working on the business professional regulations and trying to take those through. That's the type of project which would go to long range.
Okay.
The other component of this is that I want to assign sign permits to my short range planners, because currently code enforcement is doing sign permit approvals. And she's so behind on code enforcement that she can't adequately enforce violations and nuisances, because she's busy reviewing sign applications and talking to customers at the counter who are trying to get signage up on their building. And so I think if we shift from code enforcement to the short range planner, the signs, and then the long range stuff from the associate planner to this new position, will free up code enforcement capacity as well. So it's kind of shifting how things are done in the department. And then the other one on there is there's the UW studio project, which frankly, unless I get another position, I don't have the time to administer that project next year. I mean, there's no way that I can spend half my year, 10 or so hours a week, helping students do a project when I can barely, I haven't had a staff meeting since May, because I don't even have time for that. So that's something that if we want to do the waterfront plan or some other project, we can put it in the budget, and then provided that UW doesn't already have another project in mind. I do know that the professor who was helping us with that from Port Townsend, he just got hired to be the director of Bellingham, and so he's moving, and I don't know if he's going to continue with the university or not.
Okay.
But he got a pretty major step up in terms of the size of the city and the engagement of the public. It's going to be almost like Bainbridge Island up there. So the last one is actually for an assistant planner, and that's the other problem in the planning department, is that my planning staff does all of the clerical tasks associated with their project, whether that's writing the agendas and minutes for the planning commission meetings, which takes up a considerable amount of time, or or actually preparing or filing and keeping all of the records for the projects that they're reviewing. They're doing a lot of the low-level stuff that could be done by clerical staff, which is interfering with their ability to actually review applications. And so that's another sort of bottleneck in the office, is that they're spending a lot of their time and at a higher level of pay on clerical tasks, essentially. And so I think if we got a planning assistant in the office that would actually sort of keep tracks of the planning projects through the process and handle doing things like minutes and staffing the planning commission meetings, that would free up my planners to do more plan review and would really help out.
Is this more important than that?
I think the long range is more important than the short range, although this is less expensive than that. So I think having a dedicated long range planner is really critical, because not only do we have to update the comprehensive plan, but we also have to implement the comprehensive plan through the development regulations. And so if we say we're going to do something in the comp plan, we have to follow through and fix the development regulations. And if we don't have the staff to do that, we're potentially inconsistent with what we've approved and what we've and what our regulations say. And then beyond that, I think it's important for a lot of the issues that come to these committees. You know, if we want to work on something like the Kmart project,
Right.
Or even what are we going to do with Bay Street, I don't have staff that can do that other than myself, and my time is very limited because I'm essentially doing all those tasks in addition to trying to manage the department. And difficult to do both jobs.
So, does our committee have any thoughts?
80 hours is a big ask, it's a total of 80 hours there.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing though, is the permits that are, you know, land use permits come before the building permits. And so it's difficult to see what's in the pipeline. That's why I included the map in the section, which I don't know why it printed that poorly. I'm gonna clean that up before it goes out in a final version. But the projects that are in the pipeline right now are gonna lead to a lot of short-term revenue as the building permits associated with those projects come in. And I think we're in the initial phase of something that's going to be much bigger. And next year, if the land use projects are approved, like Stetson Heights, and if that goes to construction, you're suddenly going to have building needs for building inspectors to actually do all the building inspection work that's associated with that.
That's the point that I think of is the backlog. And if we move forward with traffic impact fees or any of these other things that we're looking out there, if we can't get these developments out of planning or into planning, we don't have access to those funds.
I agree, and I don't think cutting the baby, you're not gonna get a long-range planner in 30 hours. It's gonna have to be a full-time, decent job, or you're not gonna get anybody that's gonna be able to really help you.
Well, what's puzzling is that you have it looks like there's a couple of requests for 20 hours. And, yeah, what type of person could you get for 20 hours?
Lower than associates, assistants.
Well, an assistant is clerical staff, and I think we could absolutely get that.
But the long-range planner, you know, I'm looking at that as that's not a 40,
Well,
that's not a 46, 47 ask. That's really gonna be close to 100 for.
Yeah, with benefits.
That's
Because this is
year.
just half a year.
For 2015, okay.
Yeah.
And that might be where we really truly need.
Well, and the other thing is, you know, we have an intern right now who's graduating in July, and so I would expect that he would apply for that job. And I don't know whether that opens internally or not. That's a question for HR. But, you know, I think he would be a great candidate to bring in because he's at the bottom of the experience scale and is sort of an entry-level position. But we could open it up and also find much more experienced candidates. But he's learned a lot, and he's actually right now helping out in his time. I mean, he's reviewing business licenses and doing some of the short-range stuff. So he's learned quite a bit about how the city works, and you know that might be the way to fill that position would be to make that permanent, or it could even be temporary permanent, where you say that this is a 2-year temporary position, and we'll reevaluate it when, depending on how revenue is and what development is occurring in 2 years.
I could see that would almost be a good apprenticeship for him. And I could definitely support, because he got a lot of work with the comp plan when the University of Washington students did their project. And then he's continued on and has done a lot. So he really has, you know, some background with the city. And if it were more of an apprenticeship for him, I can support that. I can also support Lisa, you know, making her full-time. You know, there's a lot of value in Lisa.
Yeah, I think for me, my priorities are Lisa and the long-range thing, but alternatively, if you don't go with the long-range planner and you want to keep it as an internship through the rest of the year, you take the internship amount and you double it, and you
Right.
don't approve the long-range planner. But I think that you know, we're probably going to lose our intern if it's not a permanent position, because I think he'll probably have job offers
Right.
coming out of school. The market is at least in planning right now, there's a lot of people retiring, and it's really slanted towards the you know, the employee rather than the employer to get talent. So,
Any comments, Fred?
Good luck.
Well, there's
I was also
so
trying to figure out,
much,
like,
there's,
how many you had on hand and how many you would change to, so I guess that's page 60.
yeah, that,
Yeah,
I
the
think
6
we
and
go back and
3s,
people.
6 7/8 to 8 1/4. Or something.
Well, and if you look historically back at, you know, 2012, I forget how many years back. I think last year's budget shows the 2012 number, but we were up at like 7.3 in 2013, and in 2012 we were up at like 7.8 employees. And so it's steadily gone down. The employees are going down at the same time the work is going up, but that's because there's a lag time between the revenue and the work.
the other issue is we have to remember that we went through, the country went through the recession, and there just wasn't the need for everything, and now we have to gear up for that. And this is the starting point for that.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I lost 40% of my staff, so I understand, you know, cutting, you know, from where you were to where you need to get back.
We have to make sure the work's there and the revenue's there. And everybody has a lot of asks in this budget.
I can support for assistance, Nick, I don't know, about 80 hours, so that's coming around like a lot. It's a lot.
80 hours in terms of,
Well, your total ask
Oh,
on
yeah.
this page is 80 hours. So, even though the 40 doesn't kick in until July 1st.
is it 80?
That's 70.
Well, the intern goes away.
10.
I just added
Yeah,
10,
those are-
40, 10, and
Okay.
20 to get.
Okay, yeah, because those are half-year positions, so the internship right now is half a year as well.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
So I don't know if at the next meeting, if the committee wants to formally make a recommendation, I would suggest, thinking about it, and if there's any consensus on the committee to recommend with a unified voice, then, you're free to do that.
Yeah, and
What's the ending cash balance? Is that where this would come from, or what's the?
Well, I think it depends on what you're talking about, because there's, like, the building maintenance portion could potentially be reed funding, which you have large reed reserves. This has to be something else, whether it's, you look at, there was the talk of the utility tax, which was, I don't remember where that's at, I don't think
I
it's
guess-
approved.
Cascade Natural Gas.
It has to come from ending balance or a new revenue source, basically. Which you did already increase the permit fees, and so it's possible that the permit fees are gonna exceed projections right now, because we don't have a full year of data with the new fees, but
I guess what I mean is, so this is the mayor's budget, and has everything been spent? There's nothing that's unallocated.
I think you have to look into your other
Okay.
sheet. I think that should show an ending cash
I'm
balance.
wondering, is there any amount to play with, or is it because something else
Well-
with this?
Is there an ending cash balance on that?
No, he spends it all.
Okay.
So
So he would balance the budget.
he balances the budget.
It's balanced right now.
So then the question is, what
What
is,
would we cut?
right,
But the budget is balanced, but there typically is an ending cash balance that is
Correct.
so there's a beginning cash and an ending cash. And so the budget is still balanced if you reduce ending cash and increase your budgeted amounts elsewhere. But I think you probably have a financial policy somewhere that says you have a 5% reserve or something like that.
It almost seems like the supplemental is more, it seems to get more attention than what's actually.
Well, that's the only thing that's not at balance. And so unless you're proposing to remove something from the mayor's budget, that's the only other way to free up cash is to say that, we don't want to spend money on this anymore. Or,
Right. Right. And so everybody else, Public Works, everybody has asked in the supplemental budget, so that's where we have to make the decisions. Yeah. And some of those decisions can also be increasing the revenue, as, Nick alluded to. And I would like to just briefly, in the time we have left, kind of seems to be a common question I continually have, and I guess because I'm still searching for an answer. And I went to, first of all, a couple things happened. One is I read the Kitsap sign, and Kitsap Transit sent a contingency of people somewhere in Texas and did transit stuff. But one of the people that went down there with them was Patty Lynn, the mayor of Bremerton. And she went down early. And talked to General Electric about the possibility of doing something with the Harrison Hospital site that is going to be moving in about 4 years out of the city of Bremerton. She's trying to figure out how to replace that. So I read that article, and I thought, oh, look at there. Bremerton's being proactive in replacing those jobs and using that property that they're going to be losing, that's going to need to be repurposed when the hospital. And then I went to the KEDA decision makers presentation the other day, and we listened to all of the things that are happening in Silverdale. Again, the new hospital going in, that facility, and it'll bring with it 1,600 employees. And we listened to all of the renovations happening at the mall and new tenants going in there. And we listened to a housing development that's happening right off of Wagga Way that's going to bring in, they went through systematically all of these economic projects that were happening in Silverdale. And I had read this about Bremerton being proactive, and I just came back to what are we doing in Port Orchard to be proactive in any part of our economic development? And so my call was to Nick, and I said, what do we do? How do we do it? Is there a particular, strategy we need? How do we even retain the businesses we have? It's just something that I guess I don't know how to do it. And I asked Nick again if we could discuss this one more time. And I have thought that it probably starts with our comp plan, that we need the plan. But I don't know. And that's why the plan is so really important to me that we do next year. But Nick, can you tell us, and we've got the Kmart complex empty, we've got, just a variety of, and that's not the only one. We've got the old, I don't know, we could just go block by block and say what's empty. So Nick, what do we do?
well, I guess, the conversation that we had at the short course on planning, and we kind of touched on there, but the comp plan, the goals and policies are great, but it's how the goals and policies translate into how you spend your money to make capital investments in the city. And I think that the message that's maybe missing from the city is that the city isn't making investments that are attracting business owners. And so I think that from the comp plan perspective, it's going to be that transportation element and those utility elements and saying, we are going to add capacity to accommodate growth, and this is where it's going to happen, and this is when it's going to happen. And then it's going to be putting the funding mechanism into place, whether that's the traffic impact fees combined with some debt finance of projects to actually, make the type of investments that Gig Harbor did in their what do they call it, uptown, where where everybody from Port Orchard apparently is going to shop.
Not me.
Yeah.
But a lot of people. I think the Bethel, the Sedgwick, those projects, in addition, probably doing a corridor plan and a capital facilities plan for investing in downtown and figuring out how you're going to finance those improvements are the key to, creating this atmosphere of things are happening in Port Orchard and the city's doing its part to invest, and they're putting the things in place that we need to be, to do well in Port Orchard. So really what it translates to is how do those goals in your plan become capital projects in your budget? Because the comp plan and the budget are supposed to be consistent with each other.
But we had at the last council meeting, Gary Anderson spoke, and he was speaking primarily about not adjusting our UGA boundaries. And he talked about demographics and the need for, what I heard him say was the need for more residential, more housetops here in order to attract business.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was hearing. I was hearing that you have to have more density, and if we shrunk our UGA, we're going to lose the ability for density.
Well,
is that kind of what he was saying?
No, you're not losing the ability to density because that's a matter of increasing the density that's allowed in your existing zones.
Okay.
So I think that in some areas that are suitable for that type of thing, and other areas are not. But the UGA does add rooftops to the city, but it adds them in a way that puts greater strain on your transportation systems and your infrastructure because people are having to cover a greater distance to get to the things that they're doing. And so it's really, that's a question of what does your development pattern look like, not necessarily how many people is the city accommodating. But he's absolutely right that to attract the types of businesses that are going to bring in sales tax and other things, we don't have quite enough, residential housing growth or economic growth or population base to make that happen. And I think that's what we're hearing from Home Depot to an extent is they don't feel like things are quite strong enough for them to spend the money that it's going to take to build here. And so I think we're right on the cusp of being attractive to somebody like that, but I think we need to see more households coming in, and probably more households that have the level of income that are going to make stores want to come here.
Well, Target was almost here. Home Depot was almost here. Walmart did expand. So obviously they were looking at that area to build a brand new store for the economy to take anyways. We haven't lost or gained a whole base of population. Matter of fact, we've gained more since then with the annexation.
Yeah, the annexation isn't necessarily new housing, it's just the population shifted from one jurisdiction to another.
Correct,
But the apartments out there, that's 1,000
huge.
people.
Yeah, and so what's keeping them from, or stores like that from looking again?
Well,
'Cause
Home
I don't
Depot
believe
is
it's
taking another look at the proposal, and they're basically saying, is this project feasible? And I think they probably have $2 or $3 million invested into the property and the entitlements that they were trying to make that happen. And they're saying, it's not, it's maybe strong enough for us to come there, but it's not going to be a huge money maker for us. It's really, maybe the question is it worth it just to get another store built for the future versus having immediate return on
that was
investment?
only because Lowe's got there first.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too. Yeah.
They're leading competition to Lowe's.
And Lowe's is also on the state highway versus,
Well, and Lowe's was dealing with the city, and Home Depot, when they started, was dealing with the county.
With the
Yeah.
county. So, yeah.
so anyway, I think that a lot of those things can happen, but part of the barrier and part of the reason that impact fees are so helpful to developers is because when we do SEPA review on a project where impact fees don't exist, like Stetson Heights, we have to say, we got a letter from the state, which impact fees don't cover state facilities, but for instance, if, the county came to us and said that, is it Bear Lake Road?
Berry Lake.
Berry Lake Road. They said, well, we're not sure that the intersection of Berry Lake Road and Sydney can handle the additional traffic from this development. So tell the developer to go do a traffic study that will tell them what the impacts are. And if there are impacts, the developer is going to have to construct those as part of their project. And for a developer to take the risk of building a project when they don't know the actual cost of building something, it's difficult for them. Whereas the impact fees, if that intersection is in your impact fee calculation formula and it says that, you know, in the next 20 years, we're going to use impact fees to pay for 47% of this intersection, we don't go to the developer and say, do a study that tells us what the impacts are to this intersection. We say, tell us how many traffic or trips are going to be generated by your development, and you're going to pay $3,000 a trip and you're done. And they have absolute certainty with what they're going to build. Same with Home Depot, same with Target. They know on the front end before they apply how much it's going to cost them for transportation impacts, and they only have to deal with their frontage, which is the driveway in and out of their development and their sidewalks if there aren't any. And that's the extent of, you know, the risk of having to construct something after you've invested a bunch of money in a project. So the transportation impact fees, while they're a fee that nobody wants to pay the fee, it's a whole lot more desirable than the uncertainty that comes from not having traffic fees, which is an unknown mitigation that you may have to do that's only going to come out of the process of you spending a bunch of money to see if you can get an approval. So it's, you know, I think that's a huge thing that the city can do to make things more certain for developers without making things more costly. It's just a known cost versus an unknown cost, but knowing that cost earlier in the process. So it's, and then I think, like Fred said earlier, you know, the city for transportation improvements, making transportation improvements is the #1 thing you have control over to attract development, whether it's residential or commercial, and there's no revenue source, whether it's car tab fees or benefit districts or even local improvement districts or some other, you know, mechanism of funding that. Until those things are in place and you're actually making those improvements, you know, I think there's just too much uncertainty for developers.
Yeah, and I agree. You're gonna get a whole lot of activity on Bethel until they see a 3-lane brand new highway with utilities and brand new sidewalks and drainage.
Nice landscaping. I mean, look at Gig Harbor.
That's exactly what the Gig Harbor put in Burnham Drive, and they
Yep.
put in the traffic circles, they put in the utilities.
And the landscaping is maintained, and
they did it from the freeway to Peacock Hill. And
Another,
everything's gone in there, and they're still building in there, you know.
right now, the piece that we're missing with that is they had one property owner there.
yeah,
That was instrumental in making all of that happen with them. And it was the same property owner, I believe, in fact, I know it was, the same property owner owned what is now developed into Gig Harbor North, zoned uptown. You know, and it's a little different because they had a large tract of land and they had ideas, so much was going to be retail, so much was going to be single-family residence. And I remember when they decided to pull out, because at the time I was in the mortgage industry, and they announced that they were going to temporarily suspend their any of the residential area up there. And I was like, oh, that's not good, you know. I mean, that's what I heard, and now they've worked through all of that, because that was 10, 15 years ago. But they had one developer up there that spearheaded all of that.
and that's why I mentioned previously that Sedgwick, I think, is more attractive because you do have slightly less fragmented ownership than Bethel. It's closer to the highway, but the big challenge there is everybody that comes in, we have all these owners that say, well, you know, we have Starbucks, we have somebody else that wants to come in here. We say, well, you need to work out your access with the state DOT because this road is such that you either need a signal or a roundabout, and if that was on the list for traffic impact fees, the city could collect the impact fees and go build that improvement and then even collect retroactively from the development that happens there, but we could actually create the access and the traffic management that's needed to see that land develop. And it's probably a better location and more attractive to developers than even along Bethel at this point. But
Because when you think about it, we keep thinking Bethel's going to develop, but it could easily be Sedgwick going east.
Not with big box stores in the same way, but I think they're, you know, another shopping center like where the Burger King and the sushi place and Subway are at Sydney Sedgwick. I mean, some small little things like that, I mean, those generate property tax, and those are not feasible when major intersection improvements are needed to, you know, to build it. So, anyway,
Okay.
yeah, it's getting late.